Welcome to episode 410 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and he's Emile Evanesian. And even though it's not the calendar midpoint, this World Cup break means we're kind of celebrating the midpoint of the season. And today we're doing that by handing out our first half grades to every first team player so far this year. Emile, I have the unenviable task of keeping this train on the tracks. What is your early grade for us to stay focused if you were to rub your crystal ball?
I'm hopeful for a 7 to an 8. If we get a 6, I'll be thrilled.
Yeah, I have that conversation with my wife sometimes where she goes, "Oh, yeah, I mean, the podcast's still going on." I say, "Yeah, it's still going on." And I feel like, yeah, my podcast is like a 7.5, but it's a 7. It's maybe even a 6.5. When Barca get knocked out of the Champions League, we drop down like a 6.5. But as long as, very much like Barca winning La Liga, you're going to hear a lot of these grades are kind of contingent on Champions League, La Liga, and trying to put all that together. And again, very much like the podcast, where I feel like over the course of a whole year, I'm at a 7.5, 7. And because we don't dip below that point, we get some W's, and not everything's perfect, but we get some W's. So, all right, as I said, so those grading systems that I think other people use, and I mean, I even use it on YouTube. I use A through F, which is the American school system, and those grading systems are kind of stupid. Not A through F, but all these grading systems are on their own parameters, I should say, which I guess is where some of the fun comes from, of course. But we are going to do for this 1 through 10, with 1 being almost impossible. Nobody gets a 1, and obviously the highest. And again, as I said, due to the fact that Barca is leading La Liga and have won all but 1 game in Spain and lost only 5 total games this season, something tells me, Emile, that our grades are going to be higher than the responses in either the comments on YouTube or responses on Twitter. So, all right. Usually everybody starts with the keepers and moves up the field, but I want to know how much trouble we'll be in right off the bat. And I want to start with the forwards and work our way back. I also want to go as long as possible about talking about the back line. Of course, I'm kind of putting that off, which should probably have 2 different grades, as I've said, 1 for the Liga and 1 for Champions League. But unfortunately, we've combined them to get ourselves in trouble. So let's start with the front line, get right into business here with Robert Lewandowski. And I will set the stage for you. Robert Lewandowski, 19 appearances, 1,505 minutes, which is second on the team and most of any outfield player. The minutes caveat here, too, I'm also setting this up. I'm going to be mentioning minutes a lot, but only 8 players who I'll reveal as we go along have more than 1,000 minutes this year for Barca. And Lewandowski, as I said, is the highest outfield player with 1,505. His numbers this year, 18 goals, 4 assists, 0 for 1 on the PK. I don't need to tell you which penalty he missed. I think that one is recent history. 2 yellow cards, 1 red card, of course. I also don't need to tell you about that one. He has a 1.08 goal per 90, a 14.1 expected goals, which is absurdly high, considering the next highest on the team is Ansu Fati with 5.7. So almost triple everybody else's expected goals on the team, which, again, also does bear fruit, the fact that he has 18 goals. So let's start our grading system and kind of set the precedent, Emile. I have Lewandowski at an 8 of 10.
Yeah, I would say about 8.5. Yeah. I think we're probably along the same lines in the sense that in La Liga, he's been, just literally everything you would have hoped. We talked before the season when he was, when there was a talk of signing him, and then when he was signed before the season, we said we talked about his age, and we talked about, do you want to sign him to a 4-year deal or anything like that? But we also just banked on the fact that this guy keeps himself in incredible shape. He's a physical marvel. He's, just technically a standout, and he's been every bit of that and more in La Liga. And, maybe, I don't know if I'm not dinging him enough or anything, but, kind of the only thing that keeps him from, 9.5 range is, he's either missed glaring chances or gone missing for long stretches in vital Champions League games. And as a result, Barca are now in the Europa.
He has 2 touches of the boot in that first matchup against Bayern Munich in Bavaria from being a 9. Because the Valencia winner, how many winners has he already had this year? And especially coming in really clutch, important moments in the Liga to get Barcelona the 3 points they need over and over again. As I said, the difference between 8 and 9 is Champions League and the Liga. And I think that's going to be a conversation point as we continue on throughout this list. Dembele up next. Again, we're going to keep this moving. Dembele up next. 20 appearances for him, 1,279 minutes. Could you have believed coming into the season that Ousmane Dembele would be fourth on Barcelona in total minutes with his 5 goals, 7 assists, and 4 yellow cards, 0.84 goals plus assists per 90. And he also did sign a new deal, which put his salary much lower, which is unfair. Like, I don't want to say contract signings are
I
important.
know. I don't want to count that as part of his performance, but
but I think he gets a 7 due to the expectations and the parameters for which his new contract is set. So I've given him a 7, but I mean, I don't know. You can actually talk me into a 7.5 or 8, depending on what you have.
I mean, I think I would actually go 8 for him because he, like you said, he's been, outside of, Lewandowski, and I'm trying to think of who the other 2 guys are that have more minutes, but he's been, of the outfield players, almost as close to a constant as there's been. And he's accounted for 12 goals. And I do think even in some of Barca's more flat performances, by and large, I mean, I don't want to say he looks motivated because, it's patronizing to, kind of talk about peak apex athletes. And, as I sit in my, office chair and talk about whether they're motivated or engaged, but,
Yeah.
but he looks more dialed in, I think. And I mean, I think he's been fantastic. And maybe that a little bit of that's maybe being colored by the couple times that I've seen them in person this year. But I also just, when I've watched him on TV, Champions League, he's, and even in the flat kind of underwhelming Champions League performances, I thought he was doing more than most to try to salvage something, even in that sort of the useless second Bayern Munich game.
Well, I think it's a reminder too that Xavi not say built this team around Dembele even more than Lewandowski, but Dembele is the influential player. I mean, look at Athletic Club when Barcelona completely destroyed them. Dembele was the difference in the first 3 goals. I mean, he was the one who makes things happen. And you see that in those times when Dembele doesn't have it, I mean, even against Almeria, right, that Barcelona went out and smacked them around because Dembele was arguably the best player on the field. And there are times, again, going back to the Champions League, when he's been wasteful. But I don't think, unlike last season when I looked back in my, again, I do the 5 headlines. So I looked back in my other headlines, and I was much more critical of Dembele last season. There were just more times when he didn't show up. And I think that is what we get with Dembele, the hot and the cold. So I felt like 7 out of 10 was fair because I felt like 30% of the time you were asking more for Dembele, but 70% of the time he gave you all you needed and more. And so I think that's why I settled on 7 of 10 that I did. And I think, and on a similar vein, I mean, almost a complete opposite scenario here is Rafinha. 18 appearances for him, 10 starts this year, 2 goals, 4 assists, 1 yellow card, 0.21 goals per 90, which is really interesting. It didn't affect the number of grading I gave him because of expectations, but I do wonder, I thought back to when I previewed and I talked to Oscar, the Leeds United fan, and I compared it to last season at Leeds, where he had 11 goals, 4 of which came from the PK spot, though. So he only had 7 total goals, 3 assists, and an 0.34 goals per 90. Again, comparing that to an 0.21 goal per 90 this season. And this year is his breakout year. So that's why I'm comfortable going with a 6, because yes, we do want to see more from Rafinha, but I can't also say it was a complete disaster, because I feel like he's out of form and there could come a stretch where he scores 4 goals in 6 games. And now all of a sudden he's got 6 goals on the season, or make it 7 goals in 12 matches. And now he's got 9 goals and he doesn't take the PKs. And so now he has 2 more goals than he had last year from the outfield. Right. And so there is this world that I wonder what we expected of Rafinha and what he is. And that's why I landed on 6.
I'm going to go 5.5 just because, I mean, in many ways, he is what Barca signed. Like, he's not, sometimes you see a big money signing and, you might not have watched them a lot at their former club and, they get to your team and it's almost, as a fan, you feel like you got a lemon because you're like, wait, what is this? You guys told us he is what he, kind of, he does what it says on the package. But I think, there were some early season performances where I thought he looked fantastic, and the dip in form I think has come at a bad time. I mean, not in the league. Barca are still doing perfectly well in La Liga, but I thought that he underwhelmed in the Champions League a lot, and I think also his form has dipped in La Liga. It's just because of the rest of the squad. It thankfully hasn't wound up costing the team in the table.
Well, I think Rafinha being put on the left by Xavi for those few weeks was disastrous. That's what
Yeah.
kind of knocked him off kilter, and hopefully he's back on kilter. I mean, with the understanding that he's only going to play on the right side. Okay, Emile, we are already we'll say off our target as well for like 2 minutes per player. So picking it up here with Ferran Torres. Give it to me. What's your Ferran Torres number?
6. I I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's sort of a reasonable number. I could be talked into a 6.5 because I think he's still doing what we talked about him doing last year. He gets into good positions. He has a nose for scoring opportunities. He does seem to be playing with more self assurance and confidence now. So, I mean, that does suggest that maybe there is, I mean, there obviously is another gear for him, but hopefully that he is poised to actually find it. It's a little bit. I don't know. I can't really go higher than 6.5 based on what I've seen, but his ceiling is obviously much higher.
Yeah, well, looking at the numbers for last year, if you were more frustrated with him last year than you were this year, that's actually fair because numerically that's what we're seeing. 18 appearances, 7 starts for him, 5 goals, 1 assist, 4 yellows. Third on the team with a 4.7 expected goals and an 0.59 goals per 90, which is actually third on the team behind only Lewandowski. And interestingly enough, Memphis, but Memphis only played 3 games, so small sample size. So really second on the team in expected goals,
Yep.
which tells you that, yes, he does miss. And that's why his expected goals are so high and his goals are just 5. So compared that to last season in the Liga, he had 4 goals, 4 assists, and an 0.25 goals per 90, but a 7.2 goals expected goals, which means last year he had even more chances and he was missing even more. But yeah, he had that awful miss a few weeks ago, but then he goes to the Champions League and kills Victoria Pilsen, which is a good thing for his confidence. So we'll have to see where his confidence lies after the World Cup. Again, he could have a huge World Cup, and all of a sudden you get a Ferran Torres coming back to Barcelona. Speaking of potentially having a huge World
By
Cup,
the way, what number did you give him?
6.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yep. So again, for those keeping track at home, I gave a 6 to Rafinha, 6 to Ferran Torres, and you know what? I'm giving a 6 to Ansu Fati as well. 20 appearances for him, 5 starts, 3 goals, 4 assists, and 0.38 goals per 90. Again, I'm saying a lot of numbers here, but that's as we're talking about the margins, and I'm like, is it a 5.5? Is it a 7.5? I'm kind of using those numbers to kind of back up the eye test of what I'm seeing. And with Ansu, it's very similar. 5.7 expected goals is second on the team. Again, he has 3 goals from that. Again, at 0.38 goals per 90, which is a bit lower than we expect from Ansu. He's had quite a dry spell since he banked in the first 2 goals earlier in the season. So for Ansu, it's only sad when those reports come out from his camp, which again is the Jorge Mendes camp, that says, hey, he's fully fit now. Why isn't he getting starts? Why is he getting minutes? But it's an odd thing too, because Ansu truly is the only left winger on FC Barcelona, and they could really, really take off in the second half, especially in Europe, because Ansu has been a big game player in the past, and he hasn't had that this year. But again, he's also only 20, so the World Cup could be a life-changing experience for him.
Well, so I think, yeah, I mean, I want to go higher. I mean, maybe just out of my just affection for Ansu, I'm gonna go 6.5. But look, I think a little bit of that though is I'm basing these grades on what has actually happened. I mean, there's a little bit of projection and what is someone's ceiling and stuff like that. So yeah, based on what's actually happened, I think probably a 6.5 is about right. The one thing is the dry spell that he's gone through, and a lot of, I don't want to say a little bit of, he hasn't had his rhythm exactly, and he's occasionally looked disjointed and in the system and everything. Yeah, maybe some of that is on him. Some of that is the accumulation of injuries and everything else. But I do think that to an extent, and I don't know what is talked about behind closed doors, I've been so frustrated with the fact that you need to put him out there to start a game every so often. And we talk about he has been a good big game player, and I've seen flashes from him where he looks fantastic. I always go back to one where I thought he was Dembele, and it was because he was so kind of fluid and fast. And I am forever going to be annoyed that he didn't start one, or honestly, for me, it would have been both of the Inter in the Champions League and El Clasico that week, because this is the superstar. This is your number 10. This is your guy. Let him be that. I mean, I feel like playing 25 minutes a game, I don't know what we fully expect. I mean,
Yeah.
it's effectively like you don't ask a pinch hitter to be, peak Barry Bonds, to do my usual mixing of sports metaphors. But like this guy needs to he needs to work up a ladder. He needs to get into the game. So a little bit of that is on Xavi, I think. But yeah, I guess 6.5.
Agreed. I want more Ansu, and I think
Mhm.
with more Ansu, he can only go up. And I think maybe
Yeah,
that's being too positive.
agreed.
Um, maybe his confidence has again. Maybe his confidence is even worse than we think it is. Like we don't know what the mental toll is behind the scenes. Remember, this kid got really famous at 16, and you don't know how that's affected him over the last 3-4 years now since he's again been famous. Speaking of being famous, Memphis Depay, who's known a lot for his his rap career and the Garza thing. I almost have to give I almost want to say not applicable or an NA on this, like because
It's like
it feels
incomplete, kind of.
yeah, like it feels so silly. Like I mean, 3 appearances, 2 starts, 130 minutes, 1 goal, 0.69 goals per 90. That injury has meant that he's not available. So I mean, do I give him a 5? Because really, with the three
Well, because
starts of
he's
the
looked good in that, in those
wow,
whatever 130
130
whatever
minutes.
minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he his 0.69 goals per 90, as I said, is second on the team behind Lewandowski. That's
yeah.
because he had 1 goal in 130 minutes. So again,
I
my
saw
math
that
isn't
goal actually. I was sitting at that end of the stadium when
yeah.
he scored it. Yeah,
He was a goal even in preseason. Not to say preseason to be on and all, but he looked like being a bench option. He looked like he was could have been a really important piece off the bench and just put in goals
yeah.
in a way that you don't trust Farron. Farron and Ansu, I feel like sometimes, and they have to kind of get a hold of the match, become comfortable in the match. But
Yes.
Memphis just seemed like a guy that you could go out there like a wrecking ball. And yeah, maybe it's because his thighs are so big. And I'm thinking about that. But really, he just sounds like he could. He just looked like
Well,
you go out there. Hey, well, you got 6 minutes to figure something out. And he's like, all right, I'm going to smash my way straight through, and we're going to get something done.
that's kind of what I was going to say. Is unlike the other two guys, which I mean, whatever we can talk about it ad nauseum, but I don't think Memphis's confidence ever wavers.
Yeah, unless he's playing for Manchester United again. No, not in a Barcelona uniform at his age and in his prime.
Yeah,
No way.
yeah, I agreed. But I mean, I think if you put him, when you put him out there, whatever task you give him, he seems like a dude who believes that he can just do the undoable in a ridiculous amount of time.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna actually settle on incomplete 130
Yeah,
minutes. Just like you need at least 200 minutes or
yeah, it's
300
like a
minutes.
game and a half he's played. Like
Yeah,
you can't
it's
really go with.
nothing.
Yeah,
Okay, well, we're for those keeping track at home, we are beginning to get back on schedule. Maybe,
yep.
but we also go to the midfielders where things are going to get really difficult because I could probably go 35 minutes on Busquets, but we instead start with Pedri. 19 appearances for Pedri, 1,426 minutes. He's third on the team, which again, looking at his injury issues from a season ago, for
Mhm.
him being third on the team and having only picked up one minor knock, that's a really good thing. He has 3 goals. Interesting point here, 0 assists for Pedri so far this year,
That's
and an
shocking.
0.19 expected assists per game. Also has no cards, which again is a little, maybe just the tiniest little, that's like a 0.2, 0.3 little bump
Mhm.
there. But I gave
Yeah.
Pedri an 8, tying him with Lewandowski for tops on the team, at least at this point. So yeah, I went an 8 with that. Even though he has no assists, Pedri has consistently been Barcelona's most important, not even influential, but just I think he's been the most consistent player this year, game in and game out.
Yeah, I think in a
It-
vacuum, like at this point, I think he is their
yeah.
best player. Just in
Well,
a
I was going to say that his floor this
yeah,
year, I think has never dipped lower. Like I can't
Mhm.
think of a single game this year where there wasn't at least a few moments when you're like, okay, Pedrick really impacted this game in a positive way.
Yep.
I don't think he really even put a stinker in this year.
No, I don't think he's ever put in a. I don't think he's put in a stinker at all this season. And kind of those moments that you're talking about. There are the moments where you feel his impact very much, and then once or twice a game. I mean, and sometimes they're on. sort of nothing plays, where it's just whether it's collecting the ball or just like a little touch or a feint or something like that, where he's, kind of that specialness kind of radiates off of him, and that never seems to slump. But he also seems to never. He doesn't seem like a player that leans that kind of gets drunk on the fact that he is so effectively like a kind of a genius level player, and it doesn't seem like he ever kind of lazily leans on that. Yeah, I think he always just puts in a performance, and he effortlessly plays like Pedri, which is a great thing to do. I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm at an 8 as well. I wanted to give him an 8.5. I would like to see more tallies in the either goals or assists columns to
Yeah.
kind of take that last step. But I mean, I don't know, if he scores slash assists on 3 goals in 2 games when they come back, I'll immediately be at 8.5 with him.
Yeah, I mean, the fun fact, I don't have the photo evidence, but I
Mm-hmm.
did have a conversation this year with his dad when he came to visit the NYC Pena.
Oh,
I
nice.
misheard. I thought it was his uncle, and then like had a quick conversation with this guy, and then after the fact, found out that it was actually his dad. And his dad is the language barrier was rough. My Spanish is not good enough to like fully. It was just a lot of congratulations and things like that. But
Yeah.
father, even meeting him, was very humble and seemed to be very nice, and it was just very down to earth. Like, why is this guy all the way in New York City, meeting nobodies at this bar? And yeah, his dad was very gracious with his time and just a nice guy. Okay, for full discretion, the next one is Gabi, and I'm going to let you say the number because I have to be honest and say that this was the hardest one. This is one where I might even not tell you what my number was, and I might change it to whatever you have if I like your answer.
Man. I don't know, the ratio of. I mean, I'm gonna say I'm torn between 7.5 and 8 for full disclosure.
Really?
I'm gonna give him 7.5. Now I think a little bit of that is with with few exceptions. I think he is the player that I sort of whose personality I enjoy most, and whom I enjoy just kind of watching do what it is he does. I'm going to say 7.5. Now that one might be a little bit of me doing the thing that I said I wasn't going to do, and uh, you know, projecting a bit, and kind of rating based on potential. But I don't want to go much lower than that. If that sounds, yeah, I'm going to say 7.5,
So
and I'm biased.
what's so tough about Gabi
Yeah.
is that for me, the eye test is a 7.5 because you're right. Like, this team even takes on his personality at times. Like,
Yes.
he was one of the only ones that I could argue was I think overwhelmingly not a positive against Inter, but he was influential, and especially that second Inter game again. And the matches that seemed to rest on, do you have it? What are the intangibles on the field? Those are the ones that he seemed to even shine more so. Again,
Yes.
19 appearances for him, 1,132 minutes, are eighth on the team. 1 assist, 4 assists, 4 yellows rather, which again means that he's figured that out. 4 yellows is a
Yep.
good 0.3 expected goals and an 0.02 expected goals per 90. Those numbers are supremely low.
Yes.
Gabi, who is supposed to be a high interior, usually on the right
Right.
now because Gabi got wise to it, he is not in goal scoring positions. He is not assisting. He is not creating. And so it is. And so I am stuck in two minds here. I had written on the page 6.5, but I will commit to 7
Okay.
because, as you said, the eye test tells me that he has been a very important player for Barca to the point where you could argue in the first half of this half that he did deserve to start over Frankie de Jong. And the problem was the
Mhm.
next guy we're going to talk about, and Pedri and Gabi should have been locked in starters because of the way that he was important to the team and building up. He was not so great when they put him on the left wing, and he wasn't so great as a left interior, but very much like Rafinha. When Xavi has played Gavi where he belongs, it all makes a ton of sense. So I
Yeah.
think I'm going to land with 7 because I can even put part of that responsibility as to why Gavi isn't higher on Xavi instead of on
Right.
Gavi himself. But as I said, I want to see more production from Gabi. But again, I also have to give him a 7 because that's rated on expectations of a 17-year-old. And so
Yep.
I think 7 is fair. 6.5 is a bit too harsh. Speaking of harsh, here is this the lowest grade I gave? No, just double checking. But Sergio Busquets gets a 5 for me. I'll go through my little Sergio Busquets thing here. 16 appearances, 1,195 minutes, fifth on the team. Remember, last year he was first for outfield players,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe a little step back, if you will, quotes around that one. One assist, 9 yellow cards, 1 red. Now, he was in the 90th percentile of aerial duels won, which is almost the highest of his career, 77th percentile in tackles, 70th in interceptions, and still 94th in passes attempted and progressive passes. These figures put him in comparable categories to Fabinho from Liverpool, Boubacar Kamara of Aston Villa, Valentin Rongier of Marseille, Jorginho from Chelsea, Kevin Kumpel of RB Leipzig, João Martinho from Wolves, and Tyler Adams from Leeds. Now, the crazy thing about Busquets this year, his passing percentages are up across the board. 82% on his long balls is his highest since 18-19 season. The one offensive outlier, his expected assists per game are at 0.6. They have never been lower than 1.5 since that statistic started being tracked in 2017. But
Wow.
most importantly, this will ding him a little bit. His wages jumped from 423,000 per week and 22 million yearly to 712,000 per week and 87 million annually. So a huge jump, not
Wait, he's getting
double.
paid 87 million this year?
He made no. It's 37 million annually. So he went from 22 mil last year to
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah.
So the number I gave him, I didn't, and all that. So I know I gave some positive numbers for you, but this is where the eye test is screaming at me,
Yep.
and he needs a 5. I cannot. I gave you all these numbers, right? And I made this argument. That argument is nothing. I'm immediately peeling it back because I'm watching the games, and it's a 5 for Sergio Busquets. This is his worst season probably ever. I think we can say that.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
There
it
we go.
is. Yeah. I mean, I think this is without a doubt the worst season ever. So, I mean, I'm essentially going to do here what you did with Gabi is I had 5.5, but I'm going to join you at 5 because I don't know. I think there's a little bit of a reflex that just the presence of, just the physical form of Sergio Busquets, inherently kind of it's not even an eye test, but almost just there's a visual comfort that comes with seeing him there. But then, yeah, I mean, like you said, this is when you really watch him closely. This is the worst season I think I've ever seen him have, and unfortunately, I think there's no injuries to hang it on. There's no anything like that. This is simply just age really age and decline and a team changing around
Yeah.
you.
I mean, yes and no, because it's what's interesting is what seems to be poor, and the numbers back this up, is that
Mm,
he's making uncharacteristic short passing mistakes. And I think it was either Gerard or Lampard had said this as they were like winding their careers down,
mm.
that the simple things become a lot harder because
Yeah.
physically you don't exactly have all of it. So I want to always reiterate that in transition, and Levon is always arguing with me every time I bring this up, but in transition, I don't know what we can say about Busquets taking a step back, but we can. I mean, the numbers even say that his short passing, he's making more mistakes than he's ever made.
Yeah.
In the things that he always did at an elite level. And so if the things that he does in elite level are taking a little bit of a step back, that's where you're losing it. It's not his physicality and in transition and speed and all the things that people always hang their hat on what the problem with Busquets is. The problem is that if he's not doing Busquets things at the highest level, that's why the grade is a 5. And that's why I give him that grade. So the next guy here, Frankie de Jong, I handed him a 7 from his 17 appearances, 1,137 minutes, seventh on the team, 2 goals, 1 assist, no cards for him. But again, with the caveat that his role has drastically changed. He
Yep.
went from being out of the team, they need to force him out, to being back into the team, to now the club has to reevaluate whether or not he's going to be a major player moving forward, especially with PK agreeing to retire in the way that he did. So in
Yep.
theory, if Barca don't bring anybody in, they can pay Frankie de Jong's wages, but he's still going to be with his contract too expensive. So I don't know how this all plays out, but what I can tell you is that very much like Dembele last season, if Xavi believes that Busquets has taken a little bit of a step back and it's time to start to phase him out a little bit, on the bench in the second half of the season, that means Frankie's a starter. And there can be this world where the club still tries to push him out over the summer, but he winds up being an essential player down the stretch here in the second half of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I've loved watching him play, and I think we both, for good reason, but I think we both um, dinged Xavi a little bit for usage with Ansu Fati and Gabi a little bit, but I think what we've seen from Dembele and also Frankie De Jong is, I mean, these are monumental achievements on Javi's part, because these aren't, while they are young players, these are dudes who'd gotten paid and could easily have just said, all right, I'm just going to go sit in the expensive seats at Camp Nou, you know, just collect 8 figures a year until my contract winds down. I'm not going to do you any favors. See you, you know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I mean, I really can see De Jong has been an influential player thus far, and I can absolutely see him getting more influential, because I think the reality that whether by choice or by force, Busquets is going to have to take a little bit of a step back, and I think that, when that happens, it necessitates De Jong starting. I mean, I was torn between 7 and 7.5. I'm going to go 7.5 just because I'm sort of talking myself into it as I talk about him, and I'm very sort of both impressed with how off the pitch he handled. I
Mhm.
mean, really, just some subpar treatment from the club,
Yeah.
and showed up, did his job, was a pro's pro, played center back in the preseason, and is now kind of the game has swung back to him. And he very well could be one of the most important players on the club, in the club for, at least the remainder of this season, if not beyond.
Yep. Well, the guy who I thought was going to take his spot in the preseason gets my tied for lowest grade next up, and that is Frank Kessié, who gets a 4.5 from me. 13
Mm.
appearances, 5 starts, less than 500 total minutes, has 1 goal in the 3 yellow cards. Kessié hasn't gotten used to being a Barca yet. I will say that while he is 4.5 now, it wouldn't surprise me if we give him a 7 for the second half of the season, or that gets raised up for the whole year to like a 6, because yeah, he just doesn't look like he's comfortable, hasn't adjusted. And as I always remind you, especially, it seems like players who are A, switching leagues, and B, kind of already entering their prime, those are the players that really always seem to struggle at Barcelona and getting used to it. Like, young players seem to be able to like take the things like water, but
Hmm.
Kessié already seems to be who he is at
Yeah.
25, and it's not. It's what Xavi thought he wanted, and we saw some really good glimpses in the preseason. But it seems like when the quality of the opponent went up, the things that he does well and the ways he's
Mhm.
comfortable, he's a bit behind. Both unfortunately defensively, I think a bit too, like positionally, a bit, and then offensively, that one touch passing we saw so well, it's kind of letting him down. It might be a
Yeah.
confidence thing too, but yeah, that's why I settled on 4.5, which again for Kessié, it's just a little bit of. Yeah, I just don't think he's integrated himself just yet, and it makes me hopeful for that he can improve in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's played too much for me to give him an incomplete, and I don't even think an incomplete would just be a straight up cop out. But
Yeah.
I mean, I would say a 4, and that's not to it's really not to denigrate him. I think it's a really good point. I mean, just purely based on performance, it's like you said, he hasn't, neither in defense nor in attack has he really had like a pillar to his game, and the tools are there, and yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I mean, I think when we talk about this in a few months' time, the numbers will be higher, and we'll probably reflect on something more of an, at least like a passable season from him. But I think it was interesting what you said. Yeah, it's these guys, these kind of mid-career guys that are brought in, seldom pan out here. I mean, I guess like Luis Suarez being one of the notable exceptions that comes to mind. But yeah, I mean, you either have to be young and hungry and willing to humble yourself a little bit for Barcelona, or old enough to have been around the block a few times
Yeah.
and kind of know the way the game is played.
Or do what
Um,
Rakitic did and basically reinvent yourself if you're going to come,
yes,
and then you become a really important player. And so Kessié, I mean, I think actually, honestly, he needs to look at how Rakitic did that,
yes.
and be willing to kind of reinvent himself completely. Okay, so next three, I'm going to couple them all together. It's just the young midfielders that have also featured for Barcelona's first team, and then we're going to move on to defenders. So Pablo Torre, I give him a 6 for his 4 appearances, the 1 start, the 1 goal, of course, in the Champions League, 109 minutes, 1 yellow card, and then incompletes for Mark Casado, who had 1 appearance, 24 minutes, and Alvaro Sanz came on for 1 appearance, 14 minutes. For Casado and Torre, they're making their Barcelona debuts. Of course, Pablo Torre is his first year at the club. For Marc Casado has been at the club for what is it? I think he was 12-ish when I think he arrived from Espanyol, I want to say, and I think he was 12, 13, 14, somewhere around there. Then first broke out as a U16. And so it's been a long time coming for Casado, and it was whether, as I've said before, whether he's a first teamer for the far future, I'm not sure. I don't think he has a high enough ceiling but he and along with Sanz, and maybe Sanz, but Pablo Torre for certain, we're going to see more of them on the Copa del Rey. And depending on the Liga, again, I think it's going to be tight. I don't think we're going to see that much more of them, but depending on the Europa League, and there is going to be more congestion there. So Pablo Torre might be kind of slotted into some late stage Liga minutes, I'd say, this season. And I think very much, not even like Kessié. How do I say this? It's hard because I guess Busquets is where I'm taking those minutes from, right? Whenever I say, I expect him to get more minutes in the second half. So if we expect Kessié and Pablo Torre to both get more minutes, where are those minutes going to come from?
Right.
Are they going to come from Gabi? Are they going to come from Frank and De Jong as interiors? I mean, if De Jong
plays
more as a pivot, right. So if De Jong plays more as a pivot and Busquets loses his minutes, well, that's where Kessié and Torre can get their minutes. So I don't want to say that I expect to see more of Pablo Torre in the second half of the year, but very much with the Copa del Rey, as I said, there are going to be different competitions, even maybe the Spanish Super Cup, who knows? But that one seems to matter, and because of where they play it, they seem to have all these things in their contracts that they have to put out their best, and it's nonsense there. But yeah, so Pablo Torre 6 might be too high, but again, he's also only made 4 appearances, and he's 19, just showed up, so it's like I'm not going to be too harsh on him.
I'm gonna cop out, and I'm going incomplete for all 3, and not because of anything bad. I mean, I actually think Pablo Torre looks like a player. And you and I have talked about Casado, and kind of, is the ceiling enough? Just, is he maybe more of a high floor player than a high ceiling player? Which is, that's great. I mean, that's you don't want to call him club Philly, but it's club depth. It's the kind of player that doesn't break the wage bill and just kind of keeps the machine chugging along. If that's what he develops into, that's great. It's great that they've all cracked the first team. I haven't, frankly, seen enough to have developed a super strong opinion either way, but I do think, I think Pablo Torre has all the tools to be a real player. So hopefully that comes. But
we were talking about Gabi and Pedri and their final product. They might never have the final product, but they might also have the ability to control games that you just get from midfielders, right? Like that combination of Pedri and Gabi, almost like Xavi, but Gabi and Pedri, you just see when we watch the game how influential they are to the full 90 minutes. But Pablo Torre, of that trio, again, he's also 19. He's the one who, finishing product-wise, you could say has the most potential. Like he could, at the end of a season, finish with 6 or 7 goals if it becomes that third option down the road there somewhere, and his assists as well. So you're kind of waiting for him to take his finishing product from the third division, pop that up to the first division, which again is easier said than done, especially when you're a teenager. All right, moving to the defenders. We're kind of on schedule, but because there's so many defenders, we're going to have to make them definitely shorter. So
there's a lot of them.
I don't want to talk too fast. Jumping ahead here with Ronald Araujo starting with the center backs. I gave him a 7. He only made 7 appearances, 600 minutes, 2 yellow cards. Hasn't played since September the 17th and played just the first Champions League game against Bayern Munich, the 2-0 loss. He was on the field for just 3 total goals conceded this year. 1 to Real Sociedad and 2 against Bayern Munich. It leaves us with the question, and probably the answer, that Barcelona is still in the Champions League with Araujo healthy. But unfortunately, with the time he's missed already, it is fair to call the 23-year-old injury prone, and he has been. Basically, one multi-month injury every season so far. So I gave him a 7 because, unfortunately for him, he's not on the field. And I do not say I'm going to dock him for that, but again, being on the field is a skill in itself. And Araujo, unfortunately, has only made 7 appearances, 600 minutes. Again, when he's been on the field, Barcelona has been as good as they can be, you could argue. Again, with that, they were at cost in that first game against Bayern Munich. But as we said before, if Lewandowski finishes those 2 chances or Pedri finishes his one, then they walk out of Bavaria with a 2-2
Yeah,
draw.
it's a completely different story. Yeah.
They just don't do. So Araujo gets the 7 for me.
I'm going. This is another one where I'm giving him a 7.5. I know there's the yeah. There's I'm bucking the greatest ability is availability thing, and
Mm-hmm.
because he really for me is, and I realize we have to put this caveat on him. I guess anytime we talk about him, henceforth is Araujo when healthy is for me he's in the conversation of you know, in a vacuum, best actual football player, just best football player on Barca's team, or best at the job that he is asked to do on the team. And I think he's absolutely world class when he's healthy, when he's firing on all cylinders. I fully recognize that I'm willfully ignoring the fact that he is with some frequency not healthy. But his ceiling kind of talks me into ignoring that and giving him the extra 0.5 on the grade.
I don't know though, because my actually issue and the why I landed him at 7 is because if he had been in El Clasico, if he had been as he was in the preseason, if he was in the Inter games, I think Inter set up their press, and I don't know if Ronaldo Araujo solves Barca's problems in that game. Like defensively, I mean the 3-3 at home for sure, but on the road, I don't like defensively he solves the problem, and so maybe
Yeah.
you're talking about a 0-0 draw again. Like it's Barcelona are still in the Champions League with him. I said that, and I mean that. Like they're still in the
Yeah.
competition with
Yep.
him, but he also like the reason why I stick at 7 is because his passing out of the back is something that other teams take advantage of and still game plan for. And so that part of his game is still unrefined and was
Yep.
also, even in the preseason, an emphasis for other teams to try to take advantage of. Speaking of being taken advantage of, Eric Garcia is our next man up here. And this is going to be polarizing. People are going to have opinions here. I landed on a 6.5. 13 appearances, 10 starts, 833 total minutes, 1 goal, 2 yellow cards. The times when he looked outmatched were the same times that Barca looked outmatched against Real Madrid, which is probably the worst of his season, El Clasico, and Bayern Munich at the Spotify Camp Nou. Those were his worst two games unequivocally. But Eric Garcia is one of the reasons or one of the pieces of why you say Barca can win the Liga. Because Eric Garcia, as one of your starting center backs in most Liga matches, can do enough, can do his role, can get the job done defensively,
Yep.
and offensively, he's so important to controlling those La Liga games where the ball is moving a bit slower than it is in the Champions League, and he is, again, just fine for your 4 center back. So I gave him a 6.5, again, based on the expectations, because Araujo and Koundé not available for Inter and Bayern, for Inter Milan in Italy. I mean, that was catastrophic, right?
Yep.
And so for Eric Garcia to have to play in those important matches is almost unfair to him because that's not what he was supposed to do. So that's why I give him a 6.5 because that's also not a great compliment. But I mean, there is this world where he gets a 7.5 for me because he's only played the matches he was supposed to play.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, I don't know that Eric Garcia is a starting caliber, against Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Inter Milan, but he's been deputized as many have on the Barca back line, but I think another interesting thing that you said is that I do agree with. I think in a strange way he serves as a really good litmus test for how Barca are playing against, as you said, 85% of La Liga opposition, and I've found him to be, I mean, I think pretty good at his, like you said, pretty good at his level. So I think based on those games, I'd be torn between a 6.5 and a 7. But I think I went with the 6 because I think the shortcomings, so Real Madrid and Inter Milan, not that you expect him to turn those games or change the results of those games, but I would have liked to have seen him. I don't know, like it didn't seem like he elevated a lot. Like the shortcomings didn't seem to be shortcomings of sort of commission. It was more so like it's not like he was trying stuff and it was going wrong. It was just he was outclassed in those 2 games, I thought.
Yeah, and there is this world too with the World Cup. He is one of those players with the greatest variance there. There is this world where Spain goes really deep, and he's somehow a starter for Luis Enrique at the center back position next to Laporte,
Yeah.
and Spain again. Spain do really really well, and people can say, "Hey, Eric Garcia, where is that for Barcelona?" But there's again this other world where it's a self fulfilling prophecy where if Spain do struggle and he gets beat in a 1v1 or something, regardless of how many times other defenders get beat,
Mhm.
every time he individually or it feels like he individually let up a goal, all those naysayers get to say, "See, I told you so." So
Yeah.
he is one of those players that he is whatever you want to see. If Spain succeeds and he's a part of it, then he's going to get the plaudits, and if not, it's going the other way. Speaking of 7.5, by the way, though, Jules Koundé for me gets a 7.5, 10 appearances, 10 starts, 818 minutes. Again, you'd like to see more because
Mhm.
he got hurt. 3 assists, though, no card. And the 3 assists in particular, I have to say that he's played a center back, arguably been Barca's best center back, played at right back, arguably been Barca's best right back. So Jules Koundé for me, 7.5. I think he has been, as far as the stop and start nature of his arrival, I think he's given you on the field exactly what you needed from him, or exactly what you asked or expected of him. 7.5.
Yes, I think so too. So I mean, I went 7.5 as well. So I essentially put him on par with Araujo as well because you know I don't recall. Do you have in front of you what the discrepancy in minutes is between the two of them?
Yes, Araujo has played 600 total minutes, and it's 818 from Kunde. So about what
So
2.5 extra games.
two-ish, yeah, 2.5 games more. The funny thing is like it simultaneously because Kunde did miss a good chunk of time in there, but it's on the same basis. I feel like since he's come back and Araujo is currently hurt, although going to the World Cup with Uruguay, um, you know, um, they fall into a similar category for me, which is when they're there, they are unimpeachable and they are fantastic
Mhm.
and just supremely trustworthy. Um, yeah, I mean he is what you would have hoped for when you signed him. I mean he does offer a lot of the things that Araujo doesn't at center back, and um, I don't know. I mean I've just been absolutely delighted with him, and I'm really hopeful. I mean he is not by any means injury prone or anything like that, but I mean it's just my hope that he stays healthy the
Yeah,
rest of the season so that he can kind of
that's
serve
the
as an
goal.
anchor for that back line.
Yeah, coming in here as a 23-year-old has almost never dealt with an injury. That was his longest injury
Yeah,
or time miss in his entire career. And again, it also matters for Kunde the matches he missed because he did miss the most important match of the
yeah,
season, which is frustrating. All right. Again, we're so close. I mean, to being on time, but we're just slightly. We got to pick it up. All
let's
right,
do it.
next. I did his legacy stuff. I went over and over and over again about talking to Sam Marsden about that and Levon last week and everybody. So Gerard Piqué, I don't have much more to say. 5 for me, 10 appearances, 6 starts, asked to be a big player in the biggest games. Did not. If it was a pass fail, not going to give him passing grade. 642 minutes, 2 yellows, 1 red. Yeah, obviously the red is a fun red. But yeah, Gerard Piqué for me, it's a 5 on its way out. As he said, he planned on retiring before, and then the injuries meant he was needed, and he did play like a player that was pretty much already retired. So 5 for me.
I'm I'm gonna go 4. And
Yep.
I made the executive decision to bump that a little bit as you were talking. Um, so yeah, I mean, I understand on the one hand he was never supposed to be in there, but also like he looked like he was never supposed to be in there. Like you know what I mean? Like there, I understand cool credit, but like attendance points or whatever. But that's what the 4 is for. So you
Yeah, I
get
mean,
the 4 for like showing up at work.
that's what's interesting in the Champions League. In all, pretty much all of his Liga appearances this year, though, that's like the weird argument that he's been good. Like he's been fine. Like I mean, look at his swan song against Almeria. Like
Oh,
he was vintage PK, right? And so that's why I had a hard time going below 5, just because I think he
yeah.
still showed you what he can do. But again, the minute they're in the Champions League, the minute the competition is high enough where he
Oh
needs
yeah.
to
Was
rise
it
to
the
the occasion, he
first?
did.
Wait, was it the first goal? First goal against Inter, I believe.
Yes, it was
Yeah,
when Varela got in behind. Yes.
but at the same time too, he's like motioning to calm down, like it's cool, we got this, there's nothing to worry about, while there's someone just absolutely just setting a bonfire behind you and just ready to torch the whole thing. Yeah, that one stuck with me, and so that's why his grade was going to have a 3 handle for me, but I'm, just I don't want to kick the man on his way out the door, so I'll give him a 4.
All right. Next one. I had trouble with this one too. This is my second hardest behind Gabi, if you care about that. Andres Christensen, 8 appearances, 7 starts, 534 minutes, 1 yellow card.
I don't know, like 5.5, 5. I guess I don't really have. It's weird. I know he's there, and I know he plays sometimes, but I don't really have thoughts on him, and maybe that's good to an extent. But
yeah, I push back. I feel like that's a little low. I have him as 6.5, which to me, I think.
Yeah, I should probably go 6. I think I skew a little bit lower in some of these. Like, yeah. So I guess what I mean spiritually, I mean to give him a 6.
Yeah, I think the reason I give him 6.5 is because, again, I think that's what I've delineated as solid. That's a solid.
Yeah, okay.
To me. So I think I'm learning what my quote unquote like just above average is.
Yeah.
Christensen is not a net negative, and again, Barcelona are leading the Liga. So he only played 8 times, and one of those was like a little quick appearance when he was coming back from injury. So he really only played 7 times.
Yeah.
I don't think he did anything wrong in those 7 times. Like Chelsea fans won't be afraid. Yeah, Chelsea fans. Oh, he's not going to but I mean, he's been fine. Incomplete to Chadi Riyad, who made 1 appearance, the 2 minutes, came on late, but 2 very important minutes, by the way. Throwing that out there in the last game before the break to close that out after Rafinha helped with that comeback against Osasuna. So, hey, good 2 minutes. We'll see what happens with him.
That's great. Yeah, exactly.
As I said, I would, as always the case with me, I would rather trust him with some spot minutes in the second half, Copa del Rey, all that stuff, than bringing in Inigo Martinez at this point. But that's just me. Speaking of coming from the academy and making some appearances, Alejandro Balde gets a 7.5 from me, 16 appearances. This was shocking to me. 1,139 minutes, good for 6th on the team. And bigger picture there, as far as the back line goes, Balde, Marcos Alonso, and Eric Garcia are your top 3 in defender minutes. Balde has also added 3 assists and 2 yellow cards. Correct. Right. At the start of the season, if you said, hey, Alejandro Balde, Marcos Alonso, and Eric Garcia are your most played defenders, and you're winning La Liga at the break, I think you would have to say, how? Why?
Yeah, I would ask, like, what happened to Madrid? Did Madrid get swallowed by the earth, or what?
No, 7.5 for Alejandro Balde, because even again with his 3 assists, Balde has been on the left side, on the right side. I mean, 7.5 might even be too, based on expectations. That even might be too low. He even might be an 8 because he certainly has been the revelation of the season, the most positive thing, and it looks like Barcelona have their left back spot handled for a long time, and now they're able to spend on backup money for the left back spot instead of needing like the guy at left back. Now you can shift all your attention to the right back spot and then in the future of the pivot, which, I mean, for Balde to do that in just 3 months is miraculous. Again, 7.5 might even be too low.
Yeah. I love Balde. Just I do. I love watching him. It's just he's incredible to watch, and he's been fantastic. I mean, we spoke about him, before the season, and we talked about, I think at the time we talked, last season, early this season, we talked about what he couldn't, kind of, what he needed to shore up, and maybe what he couldn't do, and what deficiencies there might be in his game. But he has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, I don't know that there's maybe 1 or 2 players that I've sort of enjoyed watching here and there more than Balde, but he consistently is right up there with Gabi for me as just the guy on this team that I most enjoy when he pops up on my screen. And
I mean, the most enjoyable thing about him this year is that he's improving game to game, like in front of us. And that is,
and I think his confidence too is just, he's playing in a way. I mean, he's playing with kind of he's found this, I don't know, this equilibrium, this ideal equilibrium of confidence where he absolutely plays like he knows he's good enough and he knows he belongs, but he's very much also aware of his spot on the team and his role, and not you know trying so hard to be a star that he's creating sort of creating problems, or trying too hard. He's playing at he's doing the right amount of what he needs to do, and what he does well.
Yep.
Yeah, I was torn between 7.5 and 8. I'm going to go 7. Actually, I'm going to go 8 for the simple fact that I think in terms of quality, at the apex, I think Kunde and Araujo are at this point, at this moment in time. Araujo and Kunde at their apex are better than what Balde is maybe right now. But the fact that that gap is so much smaller than what I would have expected it to be, and that he has logged, 300 to 500 more minutes than each of those guys. And if we're judging it on this season, I always think of like in US sports, when you're picking an all-star team, I think a big thing is, what have you done this season? And
Yep.
he's been fantastic. So I'm going to not generously, but I'm going to bump up my score and give him an 8.
Yeah. All right. We're running almost short on time, so I'm going to package all these together and we're going to rapid fire. I need all of your numbers on this on
Let's
the
go.
last four, on the other fullbacks. Marcos Alonso, 12 appearances, nine starts, 853 minutes, 1 goal, 1 yellow. What's your count?
6.
Agreed. I don't think we need to explain more. Has there been bad moments? Yes. Have there been good moments?
Sure.
Maybe 6. Jordi Alba, 12 appearances, 9 starts, 828 minutes, which is 4th among defenders, which is actually crazy to me. A guy who's supposed to be benched has the 4th most minutes among defenders. Tells you how many injuries there's been this season.
Yeah.
2 assists and 2 yellow cards. To me, Jordi Alba also got a 6.
Yeah, I was torn between 6 and 6.5, but 6 seems about right. 6.5 might be a little generous.
Well, speaking of 6.5, Sergio Roberto, I gave him 6.5. 12 appearances, 6 starts, 583 minutes. Again, still cannot stay healthy, but in those minutes, the 2 goals, the 2 assists, the 2 yellows, I actually think he's been a net positive. He's been good, and not to say he's been their best right back, but again, he's competing with the next guy. Give me your Sergio Roberto, and then
yeah. I went with 6, 6 for him as well. But your case for a 6.5 is a compelling one.
Sure. I mean, and I said he hasn't been their best right back because Araujo and Kunde are better at that position, but he has been better than Hector Bellerin, who was brought in on that free transfer. I also gave Hector Bellerin tied him for the lowest count that I gave, and that's a 4.5. 5 appearances, 3 starts, 323 minutes. As unfair as it is to him that he was thrown to the Wolves against Bayern, and he was trusted in the most important games of the season. He also, again, very much like PK, unequivocally failed those tests, and it's tough. It was again wrong guy at the wrong time, and I'm going to punish him for that. 4.5.
Yeah, I mean, I went 4, but it's like you said, it's bad luck that he was thrown into these games against the best competition, and he's not that guy. Like he's not up to that task and anything like that. But I guess that's part of you have to at least show that there is the capacity there to maybe be that guy in short spurts. And I don't even know if there is a 15-minute flourish in which Hector Bellerin could, sort of hold his own in a Clasico against this iteration of Real Madrid, or against Bayern Munich, or, like, how do you feel with like Romelu Lukaku like bearing down on Hector Bellerin? Like it just, or and just like I want something. I feel like there's very little to hang your hat on with him.
Well, and offensively, that's what he was brought in to do,
Yeah.
and even in those 3 starts and the 5 appearances, watching him and whoever was on that right side, usually Dembele, it was like watching the butter and mustard. I mean, it was just like,
yeah. I don't even know what the
goalkeepers here. So Ter Stegen, man, I said 8, but I think maybe it should be an 8.5. Like on further instruction to think of the Lewandowski 8 I gave out, the Pedri 8 I gave out, there's an argument that Ter Stegen is an 8.5 because with his 19 appearances, 1,710 minutes, leads the team. Again, I think the only reason why it's not an 8.5 is because of the Champions League. So I think every player on this team, Barca are in the Europa League. So I couldn't put anybody lower than a 4.5 because they're leading La Liga, and I couldn't go higher than 8 because they're knocked out of the Champions League already. So I think that's why I set on an 8 with Ter Stegen. But yeah, he has been fantastic, turning back the clock, and arguably his best season in, well, not arguably, it's been his best season in 3.5, 4 years, maybe even more so,
Yeah.
especially in the Liga, where those clean sheets are just rolling off. He already has exceeded his clean sheets tally from last season. Like, he's been great.
Yeah, so I went sort of bookending the two. Like Lewandowski, I gave Ter Stegen an 8.5. I mean, he is, I mean, it's such a shame because you look at, and it's a shame for so many of these guys, when you look at El Clasico and, Bayern Inter in the Champions League. And if any of those, or ideally two of those games, but if any of those results go the other way, there's just so much of the complexion of everything changes. I mean, even when I even say El Clasico, I mean, just you get a point out of that, and your lead over Real Madrid at this point is borderline commanding, given what most of the rest of your schedule looks like. And so,
And
yeah, I mean,
back too, from
because
injury.
what?
And those players coming back from injury as well.
Yes, exactly. So I think, like Ter Stegen honestly has played, on a game in game out basis, with the exception of those, the couple of poor games that he's had. He's been like a 9.5 level guy. But yeah, I mean, I think 8.5 is a reasonable score for him.
All right, last two are really easy. Anatonovsky has an incomplete 0 appearances, but he's in a lot of pictures. He's in a lot of celebratory pictures, by the way. So I think people
good
like
for
that.
him. Like he's living
like
a life.
Well, yeah, I mean, he seems, as his personality, you see more and more of it through the years. He is a bit of a character, and you actually want that in your goalkeeper, especially your third goalkeepers.
Oh yeah,
he's still just 20. So, and then not even young goalkeeper, Iñaki Peña's, getting there to almost his mid-20s, but he's 22, 23 still. He made 1 appearance this year, 90 minutes in the Champions League, 4-2 wins. We gave up 2 goals, but he also had some big saves in that first half as Barcelona find their footing. So I gave Iñaki Peña 6, which again, very much like 6.5. It's just, he was solid. He gave up goals, but they also weren't his fault. So it's like, if we saw more of him, I think he is a pretty good shot stopper.
Yeah.
And he's not bad with his feet either. He's solid with his feet. So there are worse players in this world to be your backup goalkeepers. And the fact that Barcelona is saving so much money, I mean, he is dirt cheap. I mean, he's like 1/20th of what Neto cost as far as like annual salary. So Iñaki Peña, I mean, he's doing the job that he's supposed to do. So maybe he'll make a few more appearances. I'm hoping Ter Stegen stays healthy, of course. And Ter Stegen has earned every start. But in the Copa del Rey, wherever Barcelona...
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully like early Copa del Rey, or, just the spot La Liga start, if hopefully the Europa League the Europa League run gets deeper, or any kind of snoozer, if you're able to put in a really spectacular first leg performance in the Europa League, maybe get him a run out. But yeah, I mean, I think he looks good. I don't feel sad that I don't feel sad or scared that he's the backup goalkeeper. So yeah, 6.5 sounds good to me.
Well, because we're talking about the backup goalkeeper, that means that's the end of the show. That means we hit the entire roster. We did it.
Yep.
I did fail. So I give us a 6.5. I said it was solid. We did a solid job, but on the count here, I think I'm at an hour and 2 minutes. So we just missed it.
I feel like that's okay. I would have taken
solid. I gave us a 6.5. I said it's solid. So anyway, that'll do it. I hope you give us 6.5. Actually, no, give us 5 stars. We haven't seen that in reviews lately. So go on iTunes, on Spotify, write us a nice review. That'd be nice. Yeah. So that's my call to action here at the end of this one. If you're still with us, again, you can also follow us on Twitter.
Do your review as I did my grade for Ronald Araujo. See the good and see what. See the good and see what's there when everyone's at their best.
Well, how about this? In the comments, do not speak to me the way you talk to Ronald Koeman. I heard a lot from a lot of you as we talked about Koeman, so I don't need that feedback. So anyway, all right, Patreon, YouTube, you know where to find us. Likely I'm going to make this into a YouTube video, not just the full podcast, but I might do a little image thing as well with some grades and have some fun there. So there are also, obviously, the World Cup is starting. And as I want to remind everybody, we will be covering the World Cup because it is my job. This is kind of a job for me. So we will be coming to the World Cup. It'll be part of conversations. But again, I also always want to reiterate, and this will be our policy. It is going to be covered, and we'll be talking about the World Cup. I'm going to be excited about the matches because everybody enjoys international soccer. Well, I think everyone. I know there are people who don't, but I mean, I enjoy the fanfare of the World Cup and all that stuff. However, of course, it should not be in Qatar. I just went through the Netflix series about FIFA. Like, there's no reason why it should be in Qatar. The human rights violations are terrible. I think for anyone who's been listening to the show for a long time knows where I stand on all of those different things. And to me, being almost annoying and posturing in my belief sometimes. So I know I get to people in that way. And as I said, so we are going to be covering it. But again, I also don't think it should be happening. It shouldn't be there. It should be in summertime somewhere else. But so that's where we're at on it, just so everybody knows. Going into a disclaimer going into the World Cup season. So anyway, World Cup starts this weekend. So, it's a big time. Yeah.
It's
weird. It's weird. There's obviously here in the States, we have Thanksgiving that coming week too. So I'm actually going on vacation again. So there's one show next week coming out on Monday, and that's it. And then, say, leave me alone, but I'm just going to watch a lot of World Cup games. So if you're not happy with the World Cup, well, you don't have to hear from me for week 2. So that's great. Anyway, thanks for listening to this show. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon in Forza Barca.
Forza Barca.